بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي. ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها وانصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. وصل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين آمين يا رب العالمين. So we'll continue our reading of this article on German philosophy prior to Kant. So we had stopped here on Christian Thomasius's conception of truth. In any case, the centerpiece of Thomasius is logic. I've never heard anybody pronouncing it, so I'm not sure, but I'm just trying to pronounce it the way you would in German. Thomasius is logic, and probably its most influential. In any case, the centerpiece of Thomasius is logic, and probably its most influential aspect is his theory of truth. According to Thomasius' definition of truth, truth consists in. So his definition of truth consists in the truth consists in nothing other than agreement between human thought, let's say claim, that would be, and the constitution of things outside our thoughts. So this is generally known as correspondence theory of truth. And although there are objections to, variety of objections to this theory of truth in philosophy, in my opinion, it does contain the essence of what truth is, and that is if our claims agree with reality or not. Now, when we try to analyze and justify this, it's very hard, but I don't think if you understand by truth what we understand, you can escape correspondence theory of truth in toto. So that's what he's saying. Truth consists in some sort of agreement between human thought and reality. While the definition contains the classical correspondence theory of truth, okay, there you go, in accordance with which truth consists in the correspondence of our thoughts with things, Thomasius contains the correspondence work in other direction as well, okay, namely that truth also inquires the correspondence of things with our powers of thought. Does that mean? Which contains that the corresponding work the other direction as well, namely that truth also requires the correspondence of things with our powers of thought. Yeah, that's a bit of already. There's something Kantian in this already, or Kant might have developed this from, I don't know, from him or other people as well, but we'll come to that. But I think if we go back to correspondence theory of truth, so basic idea of correspondence theory of truth is that if I make any claim, obviously in order to make claims, Normally we call them truth claims, or more generically or more generally validity claims. And there are two things which are present in any human sort of claims. One is language. We normally make claims in language of some sort. And the other is thought. So language basically provide the form, while the thought provide the content of that. And that content, basically, we try to judge whether that content correspond to how reality is. Now, there are many very difficult problems related to this. How we get out of our language, how we get out of our thought, you know what I mean? So ultimately there will never be absolute justification for this. But so that's why ultimately you start with basic assumptions, basic beliefs, really. That's why you in if you want to use Islamic term, it doesn't matter if you are doing philosophy or science or anything, you can't escape iman. And iman means your basic fundamental assumptions beyond which you you just say, that's my assumption. You can't absolutely justify it. Doesn't mean that assumption is without reasons or without evidence, but you can't provide absolute justification or decisive reasons for those fundamental beliefs. So the basic assumption of correspondence theory of truth is that a claim, for example, the tree, a specific tree I'm referring to is green. That's a claim. So this sentence is true if and only if the tree is actually green. And how we ascertain that, through correspondence, whether this is, so I'm referring to this tree and it is green, for example, then this sentence is true, or this claim is true. So that's the basic, the crux of the idea. Obviously, justifying it philosophically, and things, the complexities which arrive in analyzing these sentences and the correspondence to reality, defining what reality is, etc. That's a very difficult things. But unless you believe in some sort of correspondence theory of truth, then the whole truth game is, turns upside down. The whole truth game turns upside down. So the correspondence theory of truth. So the basic idea of, as I explained, correspondence theory of truth is a sentence, statement, claim. Mostly philosophers these days use the word proposition, which is again an abstract idea or entity, which basically by which they try to convey the idea of content. Corresponds to effect, and by effect I mean real world situation. Sometimes philosophers call it state of affairs. One of the really annoying thing about modern philosophy, especially contemporary philosophy, is the mushrooming of terminologies. Every group of, so the philosophy, these are, the small cliques, 10, 20 people in the world, even less in many. They just talk to each other, really. And because they have chairs in philosophy, they're considered, important. So then they don't need to, really have well-defined terms. They can use, and they know through talking to each other how they are using those terms. So anyway, so this is the basic idea. Now the difficulties are, we don't need to go into that. There are a lot of difficulties, so the key idea is relationship to reality. That relationship, if it establishes one-to-one exact relationship, then that's true, the statement or proposition. And some of the main criticism of the correspondence theory of truth, how do you define a fact, for it? Because you're defining fact or reality in a language as well. So, and the second, that's one line of thought. The second line of thought is, okay, even if you can define what is fact and reality, how are you going to establish a correspondence between statement and fact? Probably through meta level statement, as Tarski does, in the meta language, and then probably you will need another. Or if you focus on thought rather than language, then So there's a correspondence between thought and fact, but it's also in thought, and it can lead to infinite regression, those sort of problems. Okay. Now he's saying that while the definition contains the classical correspondence theory of truth, which I, sort of in a layman fashion, I just described it. While the definition contains the classical correspondence theory of truth, in accordance with which truth consists in the correspondence of our thought with things, Thomasius contends that the correspondence works in the other direction as well. Namely, truth also requires the correspondence of things with our powers of thought. I mean, I haven't read anything beyond that, but before reading that, let's think a bit about it. And in one sense, it's just a truism, but in other ways, it might be more interesting. So let's think about it before reading ahead. So the idea of correspondence theory of truth is that you have a claim which is in a language, you call it a proposition, you call it sentence, you call it statement, whatever, and you have reality. So there's a tree. . and that's a green. Here the claim is that what he's saying is that it's not that the claim needs to correspond to tree is green, but reality tree is green also needs to, what did he say, take account of truth also requires correspondence of things with a power of thought. Okay, things with a power of thought and thing also need to correspond to power of thought. In one way, obviously, like one obvious way they need to be is that the reality must we might be able to grasp the reality in order for reality to correspond to our claims. If we aren't able to, so in other words, the basic question is when we grasp the reality through our mind, that's reality, yeah, and express that in language. Does that affect our mind? Does our mind actually affect? So the question is, to use Roti's phrase, for example, is our mind like a mirror of nature? Or if our mind is a mirror of nature, then probably correspondence theory of truth would be hell. But if our mind is more like sunglasses or colored glasses, then reality, we would be able to see reality only to the extent and in a way in which um, our glasses or our sunglasses or our colored glasses are able to see it. The question is whether our mind limits our ability to perceive reality, or does our mind modifies how we see the reality. So there is still reality there, but is there a modification? And if there is a modification by our mind or our language, then that modification obviously can't be part of the truth. Yeah. So that's the main thing. So one of the things is saying that reality also needs to correspond to our power mind. If because what what lie what is beyond our power mind, for example, Kant would say thing in itself. We can't actually grasp it in more empirical sense. Although we can grasp it on a different level concept, at the level of idea. But at the level of concept, we can't, because thing in itself doesn't correspond to power of mind. It's beyond power of one mind, for example. So that's what he is saying, and that's an interesting question. And obviously, this question goes back to science itself, like Galileo's um, distinction between which Locke took up between primary and secondary qualities. And Locke said that primary qualities, for example, hardness and the texture, it actually are part of things. But secondary qualities, for example, greenness and blueness, because just think of if you study the biological and botanical conception of the color, uh, how uh, chlorophyll, which is essential for photosynthesis, and how that interact with light, and then through that we see something like green color. Uh, so Locke said that secondary qualities, for example, color and sound, they are not out there as such. He's not saying they're figment of uh, imagination, but secondary qualities are, if I understand Locke correctly, are sort of the product of the interaction between our mind and the thing, or primary qualities. So even though Locke says primary qualities are present in a thing, secondary qualities are not present. They are the product of our interaction with primary qualities, the interaction of our mind. So that's sound is sort of product of our mind and reality. So in that sense, saying that green is out there won't be exactly true. For example, and you once you have done these sort of doubt, you can amplify this to include everything, as Barclay did, as you would know. Anyway, let's stop here and we'll continue from here, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa salli wa sallim ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa azwajihi wa dhurriyyatihi bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Amin ya